right, everybody. Thanks for coming. I'm Josh Bradshaw, and I'm here with WorkTech today, which is my hobby blog and consulting that I do with regards to the Internet of Things and wearables. I'm really passionate about the Internet of Things. A few years ago, I was a project manager implementing an accounting information system upgrade that involved many years, actually, of implementing new things. After building a relationship with an accountant that was in charge of building out the functions in their specific organization, I called up one day and announced yet another new feature that was supposed to save time and money and increase efficiencies. And in exasperation, she said, "Josh, I have to do this in the system now, and I have to do all these other things. I feel like I work for the system." And I said, "Don't work for the system. Make the system work for you." The issue that she had hit upon was that it was too hard to use the technology. It was too hard for her to actually make her life easier in order to implement this. And I took that insight, and I have become enamored with the Internet of Things, and as a subset of the Internet of Things, wearable devices. Because this is where we can have technology going to work for us. However, as with all things, Internet of Things, we have to wonder, are these things really going to stick around, or are they fad devices? Moreover, because we're working with wearables, is this fashionable? We can't design like engineers anymore. Boxes that go under computer desks. We're wearing these things. These are things that people will see. So are they fashionable? And then, what is the future? What is this? We are in a nascent state in the industry. So where are we going? And is there a future in this? I did myself maybe a disservice in Silicon Valley, and I went and did an MBA to make myself a little bit more business savvy along with the technical expertise that I have. My capstone course, though, was very intriguing because it had to do with managing a sensor manufacturing facility. And in there, I learned about sensors, and that's when the Internet of Things came alive for me. Following the capstone course and returning to Silicon Valley, I focused on the Internet of Things and came up with a set of predictions on where I saw things, where they were, and where they are going in the Internet of Things. And I've written extensively about them on my blog, which is at WorkTech.com. And you can click on wearable technology and read an awful lot of information. We're going to touch on those predictions and some of the industry watch work that I've done, digging in to find people who are active in the spaces for each of these predictions and what those people are doing to create solutions. And are those solutions fashionable? Are they fad solutions, or will they actually become our future? I'm not the only one interested in wearables. Investment in wearables has increased tremendously. This year, already, investments have topped 500 million. And analysts anticipate that when the tallies are in for the end of the year, we'll have 1 to 1.2 or 3 billion will have been invested in wearable technologies alone. This is a small subset of the Internet of Things, and we're experiencing tremendous investment in this area. So people are interested. Another thing that's interesting is that a year ago, maybe two, certainly two, you'd be hard-pressed to find a conference dedicated to the Internet of Things. Well, the Internet of Things, yes, but to wearables. So today in Canada, there's a conference. Tomorrow in London, there's a conference. Coming up in November, there's one in Paris. We've had some in Israel, and there's one coming up in February in Germany. The Internet, the wearable revolution, if you wish to call it, is something that isn't unique to Silicon Valley, which leads me to think that it's going to be less of a fad and more of the future, because we know, being in Silicon Valley, that a lot of times things will start out and be well adopted here, but so goes Silicon Valley and so goes the rest of the world isn't always true. In this case, though, I think we're onto something. So let's look at some of these predictions. First of all, wearables will satisfy customer needs. These are real needs. And the important thing is that we're going to, along the way, we're going to run into devices that are created that are fad wearables. Now, there may be some Google Glass explorers here in the audience today, and I don't wish to offend you, but I do want to clearly state that Google Glass is a fad device. And the reason is it's not something that's going to be readily adapted by all of the consumers out there that could potentially benefit from this device. There are many nuances with it. Google Glass will go down in history as a groundbreaking device, but it won't be what we're using in 5 or 10 years. We'll be using a next generation device or set of devices. Moreover, we may not be using something that is glass-esque in our day-to-day life, but we may be using glass-like devices in our day-to-day occupations, especially when it comes to occupations in industries where the hands are occupied and you also need access to information, such as when you're handling chemicals and cannot touch something, or in surgery or other specific situations. Another set of devices that I call fad devices is all wrist-worn fitness trackers. Now, I took this picture of some attendees earlier today who both of them had on 2 different wearable devices, a fitness tracker and a smartwatch. This isn't how it's going to be in the future. Why? Because you do not need to have 2 devices when one device can do the work of 2. And as the interfaces get better, you'll have less and less reason for wearing wearable devices. If you look at my wrists, the wearables guy is not wearing any wearables. That's because inside of the iPhone I have the Moves app, and that Moves app can tell when I'm biking, when I'm running, when I'm walking, and I don't need a separate fitness tracker. So those that are developing wearable devices, if you're developing a device that only does one thing, it may do it very well. If it only does one thing, eventually it will fade into the background and will be replaced by devices that can do more than one thing. So what's going to stick around? Those that satisfy customer needs, and I'll add on more than one need. Apex Labs is a very interesting company that's using glass and other devices in order to use wearables in industrial contexts. They're making headway, and that's, I alluded to that earlier. That's where I see a lot of wearables being used to enrich the experience of the customer, which in this case is industry. Another one is smartwatches. Obviously, there's a lot of hype about smartwatches. We're all anticipating the Apple's watch. We have the Moto 360 and Pebble, and other Will.i.am and other watches that are coming out to the market. These are things that do more than one thing, which is tell time. And we'll look at, in later predictions, how if these are developed in ways that are fashionable, they'll be less of a fad and more of something that's adopted because it's something that people will be okay with wearing. The second prediction has to do with the problem, a problem that we have in wearables and also in the Internet of Things, is that things are created in silos. We're at a nascent stage in the Internet of Things, and there's not one single platform that is available for everything to work on. So we need to have devices that cross those siloed barriers and can communicate and do other things beyond simply what the wearable does. I'll point at drum pants. This is an interesting one. They went on to the Shark Tank and had a hard time. But I want to point out what drum pants does is interesting because of one thing. They have sensors that are hidden and you can tap on them, and that causes something else in the Internet of Things to do something, produce sound. I don't see much value in me having something to tap my pants and make noise. But I see value in the fact that there's a trigger that causes something else in the Internet of Things to do something. iStot, similar. You get in an accident with your biking helmet on, you don't respond soon enough, emergency services are called for you or a relative or friend is notified. These are all examples of companies that are doing this. They're crossing that silo. They're doing more than just counting my steps, and they're communicating outside and doing something else in the Internet of Things. Third prediction, I had to create my own terminology, which is wearable alpha. You see, when you have one wearable and you have another wearable, they each create their own set of value. I propose that companies that use wearables, multiple wearables, and combine the data and information from those sensors are actually going to create more value for their users than those wearables would have separately. For 6 years, I was a project implementer at BlackRock, and we used to call, BlackRock's an investment manager, we used to call the additional earnings on a fund that you could get above and beyond, were called alpha. And so that's why wearable alpha. What we're looking for is ways to generate additional value. Now, if I had taken out that one word in the prediction, it would be really easy to say that this is happening. Because I said sensors in multiple wearable devices. And what we're seeing is that devices are being built with more and more sensors in them, which is great. But I was specific about multiple wearable sensors, and it's been really hard for me to find companies that are doing this. And I don't count if you have an app that your wearable talks to. I'm talking about if you're going to count the phone as a wearable, which you can because it has sensors in it, then use the sensor information in it and combine it with the sensor information in your wearable, whether it's a ring or a watch or what else you may be wearing. And in July, I said I'd found no company that was doing this. But I didn't actually have to wait long because Apple announced that they are using the sensors in their watch alongside the sensors in the phone in order to create the whole picture. Now, they're receiving some kickback against this because people want GPS. They don't want to run with their phone and with a watch. There are issues when you build this way, but they're actually doing this. And while I don't know anybody powerful enough to have read my predictions and then decided to change the direction of Apple, I was pleased when I saw that Apple's doing this. And it'll be interesting to test out this watch in the future. The fourth prediction has to do with analytics and sensor technology improving. There are lots of improvements coming out there. I highlight one from Monash University, that they have sensors now that can twist and bend. We've been working with silicon, and we know with the iPhone 6 that you don't want to bend it. You wouldn't want to bend this. You wouldn't want to bend your computer. You want to bend your laptop. But if you're wearing something, it has to contour to the body. It has to feel comfortable against the skin. And if we're going to sense detailed information and we're going to have things on our body that need to bend, why having materials that can bend and still conduct and sense is actually very valuable. Other innovations in sensor technology are coming as well. But on top of those innovations, we're finding that analytics is empowering us with insight. Citizen develops a smart fabrics, but they have a smart shirt. That smart shirt can generate 200,000 data points in one 60-minute workout. At that scale, big data becomes huge data, and you need analytics to drive insight from that data. Some might say, well, I don't need that granular of detail of data, but there are instances where you can pick up on these little nuances and it can add value. A rugby team in the UK is using wearable technology, and they can sense a day to a day and a half before a player knows that the player is coming down with a cold based on their performance. So when you have all of this data and analytics, you can drive insight and improve wearable intelligence. Now obviously wearable sensors are decreasing. Here's a supercomputer from 1964, which my iPhone has the same computational power. In today's dollars, that would cost you $54 to $55 million, but we didn't pay that for our iPhones, and we have supercomputers in our pockets. The S1 chip inside of Apple's watch is a computer chip the size of a postage stamp, and it is actually an entire computer. Intel was showcasing some of their technology as well. Because things are getting smaller and the cost of these things are going down, that's a supercomputer, and I'm going to have it in a watch someday. Another example is the Xbox Kinect camera is so sensitive that the video camera is detecting the man's heart rate in this example here. And this used to cost over $100 a couple years ago, and it's down to now about 25 bucks for this same sensor. Why is it? Well, because of development. Development is ongoing. More and more people are buying sensors, so you have pressure from consumers to lower the prices. And, of course, more sensors are being produced. So we have the benefits of economies of scale. I've noted in the industry watch the prices of a number of the wearable fitness companies that are out there. Pictured is Athos, but I've also noted prices for OM Signal, Sensoria, and Hexoskin, so that we can look back and see, okay, either the technology is improving or the prices are decreasing. That's what I anticipate to happen. A little bit of Moore's law applied to sensors. Here's where we have the biggest problem with wearables: energy. Both energy storage and consumption are an issue. So I call it the wearable bottleneck. Xerox has come up with a technology. They're good at printing things, so they decided to print batteries. And in doing so, they improved batteries by 30%. But that's only 20 minutes of video with Google Glass. We're not there yet. That's not enough. This research came out in July from Stanford University, and I'll sum it up because it's very technical. A 300% increase in battery. Now that's interesting. It won't be ready for market for a while, but this is the kind of innovation that we need in order for our dead devices to survive in the future. Before we see batteries and this kind of technology improving in wearables, we're going to see lower consumption. Lower consumption comes because of three things: designing specifically for the wearable. We can't just throw everything. We can't shrink a smartphone down into something and make it a smartwatch, because we're not, that wouldn't be appropriate design for a wearable. Plus, we have to remember, it has to be fashionable. And this taped to my wrist is not fashionable. I've also seen somebody who took a bite out of an apple and taped it on their wrist and said it was the new Apple Watch. But you can't repurpose things. That's the point. You have to design for the wearable. The software running in the chips, not just the software the users see, but every bit of the software needs to be tailored for the wearable. So it's not using computation unnecessarily. You can't copy and paste. We have to design for the wearable inside. And the functionality needs to be limited to the purposes of the wearable. If I have smart socks, they don't need to check my email. So functionality is important. And energy consumption in the sensors is also important. I'll point at Psychic. These guys are so innovative. They are using the energy that trickles through a sensor when the sensor is powered off and still detecting and sensing. Fantastic stuff. All right, we get to the real fashion prediction. People will use wearables to make statements about who they are. As I said earlier, we can't have our devices coming in any color we want, so long as that color is black, like the Model T Ford. We have to have devices that we can show people, and we're getting better at it. How is that going to happen? My suggestion, if you're developing a wearable and you're an engineer, is to partner with someone who's not a technical designer, but a fashion designer, and see if you can find a way to marry technology and aesthetic in order to build a brand that is fashionable, because people are going to wear these things where they will be seen. The seventh prediction has an opposite. Oh, well, this is the Apple Watch. I forgot about this slide. They said that there's an Apple Watch for everyone. By coming up with different models and different types of bands, they did hire away some great watch designers, and so we'll see people will be able to customize their watch experience. But the opposite of the seventh prediction is the eighth, is using undetectable wearables. Now, can you see it? That's the world's smallest microphone. The world's smallest microphone is just one molecule. So I was serious. It's not pictured there. You couldn't see it if it was. But the world's smallest microphone is just one molecule. This is brand new, just this month. Of course, it won't work in a wearable because it only functions in very cold temperatures. But the point is that we're getting there. Currently, in wearables, we're able to use sensors the size of a grain of sand, and that's small. And we'll be able to spy on one another conveniently because we're wearing stuff that we can sense things with. We'll also be able to wear things and sense things related to health conditions and other things that we want to detect and not let people know. There are even some wearable devices for adult entertainment that are actually quite intriguing, where you can trigger an IoT connected device to do something. The ninth prediction is that there's a debate about ownership of the data that wearables generate. We're generating a lot of data, a lot of information, but it's really hard to get your data and know even where all that data is. If it's going through the cloud, do you own it? Well, I argue that if you don't have it, you might not own it, and even if you have it, somebody might have a copy of it, and then are you really the owner? Well, you might own it, but you're not distributing it and you're not getting the value from it. And value is really the reason why there's a debate over this. Privacy debates, we'll see it in our country, we see it in other countries, because everything isn't the same here in the US as in the rest of the world. We have the right to be forgotten, and there's several issues around privacy, and people are concerned. And people are concerned about data ownership, and people are concerned of having people profit based off of their information and having no control over it. And that debate is going to continue. Now, my perspective on privacy comes from growing up in a very small town. A town so small that it got the first electric stoplight in 2011. So this is my grandfather's farm. These are his cows, and as a boy I helped install some of the fence posts there in the background. I understand the value of hard work, but I also know what it's like to be in a place where everybody knows your name, and it's not friends. Where everybody knows your father and your grandfather and your business, and there's a level of trust. I could go to a business and say, I need this thing. Can you put it on, just charge it to my dad or charge it to my grandpa? And there was this level of trust because they knew who I was. Well, in a world where we have devices that are unique identifiers that can be authenticated, and we have the data and analytics and the power to understand what people are wearing and who they are, I can authenticate the watch when I put it on or whatever it is, and then I can tap and pay, supposedly in the future. We can come to a place in time where there's a level of familiarity that has become somewhat foreign because even though we existed in small civilizations and small groups for thousands of years, we've stepped away from that into large metropolitan instances where it's hard to know one another. But I'd like to see a return to that trust where privacy is not really the concern because we can actually experience what it's like to be in a small town but in a very, very large city. Last prediction is that, and actually it's one where a lot of money is going to be made, is that wearables will enable contextual awareness. First, context of the device and context of the person. The device can know if it's in my pocket, in my hand. It can know if I'm on a plane, on a train, in an automobile. It knows when I'm riding a bike. It knows if I'm running or walking. So the device knows its context, and it knows some of the context of the wearer. If you're calling the watch or the phone a wearable because it's using the sensors. But the context of the person is actually an area where we find a bit more value. Understanding who I'm with and why I'm there. If I walk into a restaurant with a woman, is this woman my wife? Is it my boss? Is it my subordinate? Is it a business meeting? Is it some new love affair? We don't know these things today. We just know that a man and a woman walked into a restaurant. But if we have wearables and other things in the Internet of Things that are enabling us to understand why someone is there, we can focus on enriching their experience. And no one's going to wear a car, but the car is becoming contextually aware. Mercedes is to the point where it knows whether your daughter or your wife or maybe even your boss is in the front seat. This is fascinating technology. But this can't all just be about sending marketing messages. If you send me I've had Home Depot do this. I have their app. Twice I have driven away from Home Depot, and twice I have received a coupon from Home Depot. I wasn't very contextually aware. If anything, it was bad timing, but it would have been nice to have that coupon when I was at the register. So it has to be less about marketing and more about enriching experience, which is what Disney's doing with their Magic Band. They used to have crowd watchers watch the crowd and manage when people were crowding in too much in one area of the park, and they'd send a line of characters to entertain people so they couldn't get through. They still do that, but now they're using wearable generated data from the magic bands for those who stay in their resorts to analyze the crowd. And because of this, they're actually able to provide people with better experiences, and they're even able to service more people in the park because they're able to manage the crowds better. And that enriches everyone's experience. So if you're going to be working on contextual applications with wearables, I recommend focusing less on the marketing value of the data and more on enriching the experience of the consumer, whoever that consumer may be. This is the final prediction. You can find out more about these predictions and all of the companies that I've researched in the Industry Watch by going to worktechwork.com and clicking on Wearable Technology. Go ahead and reach out on Twitter or LinkedIn. You can follow me at WorkTechWork. And remember, don't work for technology, make technology work for you. Thanks.